A quiet black woman stepped into the headquarters of Sterling Civic Bank on a cold Chicago morning, and the receptionist barely looked up. "You'll have to wait outside the boardroom," she said with a polite smile. "You don't have an appointment." Around her, executives in tailored suits walked straight through security without a single question. Employees glanced at the woman sitting alone in the hallway, then quickly looked away. No one offered a chair. No one asked her name. No one dared wonder why she remained so calm after being treated like she didn't belong in a building that seemed to worship power. Resting against her worn leather portfolio was a small bronze key that caught the light for just a second before disappearing beneath her hand. 6 silent minutes passed while laughter echoed from behind the glass walls, where two powerful executives prepared to sell the very institution they believed they controlled. They thought the woman outside was invisible. They thought she was powerless. They thought no one would ever question them. But before this day was over, that forgotten bronze key would unlock more than an old door, and every person who had stayed silent would rise to their feet as the truth changed the future of the bank forever. Rain drifted across downtown Chicago in thin silver lines, soft enough to leave the sidewalks glistening without emptying the streets. Commuters hurried beneath umbrellas, taxis splashed through shallow puddles, and the mirrored face of Sterling Civic Bank reflected a city already deep into another Monday morning. 40 floors of glass reached into the gray sky, elegant and confident, as though the building had always belonged there. Across the street, Evelyn Brooks stood quietly beneath the awning of a neighborhood coffee shop. She wore a charcoal gray coat that had been carefully pressed but clearly wasn't new. A pair of sensible black shoes carried faint signs of years of careful use. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, and the leather portfolio tucked beneath her arm looked older than many of the young professionals rushing past her. Only one small detail seemed out of place. A bronze key hung from a worn leather strap fastened to the portfolio's handle. The key was small enough to overlook. Most people did. Evelyn glanced across the street toward the tower. The words Sterling Civic Bank shimmered above the entrance in polished steel. For a long moment she simply looked. The building was taller now. The landscaping had changed. The old brick plaza, where neighborhood musicians once played during lunch hours, had disappeared beneath polished stone and decorative fountains. She smiled faintly. Not because she liked the changes, because she remembered what had stood there before any of it existed. A vacant lot, broken concrete, a dream that nobody believed could survive. A passing bus sprayed water across the curb. The sound gently pulled her back to the present. She crossed the street. Inside, warm air wrapped around her as the revolving doors slowly carried her into the spacious lobby. The smell hit first. Fresh coffee, furniture polish, expensive perfume. The marble floor gleamed beneath soft lighting, while enormous digital displays promoted investment products, retirement planning, and record quarterly growth. Employees crossed the lobby carrying laptops and steaming coffee cups. Some laughed. Some checked phones. No one noticed the woman who paused just inside the entrance. Evelyn slowly looked around. Years earlier, the lobby had been filled with warm walnut walls, framed photographs of neighborhood businesses that had received their first loans through Sterling Civic Bank, and handwritten letters from families whose homes had been saved during difficult times. Now everything was chrome, glass, screens. The walls displayed smiling executives in tailored suits. Success had become polished. Memory had disappeared. A security guard near the entrance smiled automatically. "Good morning, ma'am." "Good morning." His attention shifted almost immediately toward a group of arriving executives wearing visitor badges. "Right this way, folks." He held the gate open without another glance toward Evelyn. She didn't seem offended. She simply continued walking toward the reception desk. Behind it sat a young receptionist, whose perfectly organized workspace reflected every inch of the building around her. She looked up with a practiced corporate smile. "Good morning. Welcome to Sterling Civic Bank. How may I help you?" "I'm here for the executive board meeting." The smile hesitated just enough to reveal surprise. The executive meeting? Yes. The receptionist quickly glanced toward Evelyn's coat, then her shoes, then the old leather portfolio. Finally, she looked back up. Do you have an appointment? No. I'm afraid access to the executive floor requires prior authorization. Her voice remained polite, professional, almost rehearsed. Who are you here to see? Evelyn looked toward the elevators instead of answering immediately. The board. The receptionist blinked. I'm sorry? The board. Another pause. I'm afraid I need a specific name. Before Evelyn could answer, the elevator doors opened. Several sharply dressed executives stepped into the lobby discussing market forecasts and interest rates without lowering their voices. The receptionist immediately stood. Good morning, Mr. Collins. A tall man barely acknowledged her while continuing his conversation. Behind him walked several directors. They were greeted by name. Badges appeared instantly. Security gates opened before anyone even reached them. Within seconds, they disappeared toward the executive elevators. The receptionist returned her attention to Evelyn. I'm sorry about that. She offered another polite smile. If you'll just wait a moment, someone may be available to help you. Before either woman spoke again, another voice joined the conversation. Everything okay? A woman in her 30s approached carrying a digital tablet. Her identification badge read, Rachel Torres, Executive Assistant. The receptionist gestured toward Evelyn. She says she's here for the board meeting. Rachel looked Evelyn over with the quick efficiency of someone accustomed to solving small problems before they reached senior management. I'm sorry, ma'am. Her tone remained courteous. The executive board is already in session. I know. If you're delivering documents or meeting someone afterward, I'd be happy to arrange that. I'm here now. Rachel hesitated. Something about Evelyn's calmness felt unusual. Most people turned frustrated within moments. This woman simply waited, patiently, comfortably, almost as though time wasn't working against her. Rachel pointed toward a row of leather chairs outside the executive hallway. You can wait over there. It may take a little while. Evelyn nodded. Thank you. She walked toward the chairs. No complaint, no argument, no explanation. The bronze key gently tapped against the portfolio as she sat down. Rachel noticed the sound without noticing the key itself. She returned to work. The hallway gradually filled with movement. Managers hurried toward meetings. Attorneys carried thick binders. Consultants wheeled expensive luggage. Each person glanced briefly toward Evelyn. Each person silently reached the same conclusion. She must be waiting for someone. Human resources, maintenance, facilities, maybe a vendor. Nobody asked. Nobody wondered. Nobody spoke. 6 feet away, the executive boardroom stretched along one side of the hallway. Its walls were nearly all glass. Inside, 12 people sat around a long walnut conference table. At the head sat Gregory Collins. His silver tie caught the morning light as he spoke confidently beside a large presentation screen. Even through the glass, Evelyn couldn't hear every word, only fragments. Acquisition, national expansion, historic opportunity. Several people laughed. Coffee cups lifted. Folders changed hands. Everything inside the room carried the relaxed confidence of people convinced the outcome had already been decided. Evelyn quietly folded her hands. The rain continued sliding down the windows behind her. She glanced at the bronze key hanging from the portfolio. Her thumb rested against its worn edges for only a second before she let it fall again. 1 minute. Employees continued passing. Nobody acknowledged her. 2 minutes. A pair of attorneys walked by discussing vacation plans. One briefly looked toward Evelyn before lowering his voice. Neither slowed. 3 minutes. A young analyst carrying coffee accidentally brushed her chair. Oh, sorry. He hurried away before she could answer. 4 minutes. Rachel passed again, carrying another stack of folders. Their eyes met. Rachel offered a small, apologetic smile. "Still waiting?" "I am. I'm sure someone will speak with you soon." "I appreciate that." Rachel nodded politely and continued walking. 5 minutes. Inside the boardroom, Gregory pointed toward a financial chart displayed on the wall. Several executives leaned forward with visible excitement. A folder marked "Confidential" slid across the table. One man actually applauded. The warmth left Evelyn's eyes. She couldn't hear every sentence. She didn't need to. The logo displayed behind Gregory appeared on the presentation screen. A national investment conglomerate. One she recognized immediately. A company famous for purchasing community banks before quietly closing neighborhood branches that no longer produced enough profit. The room erupted into another round of satisfied smiles. Someone raised a coffee cup in celebration. Evelyn stared through the glass. Her expression never hardened. Never showed anger. Only disappointment. The kind that settles slowly after years of trust. The hallway remained strangely quiet. Dozens of employees moved through it. Every one of them saw the neatly dressed black woman sitting alone outside the boardroom. Every one of them kept walking. No one asked her name. No one asked why she had come. No one imagined that the woman patiently waiting outside the meeting had already seen enough to understand exactly what was happening inside. A soft breath escaped her lips. Then, for the second time that morning, her fingers gently found the bronze key resting against the old leather portfolio. This time she held it just a little longer. Beyond the glass, Gregory Collins smiled broadly as another document appeared on the conference table. Whatever decision they were preparing to make, it had already begun changing everything. Evelyn Brooks remained seated outside the glass boardroom, her hands resting lightly on the weathered leather portfolio in her lap. Around her, polished shoes clicked across marble floors with practiced confidence. Phones vibrated. Elevator doors whispered open and closed. Somewhere below, the faint sound of traffic drifted upward through the towering atrium, blending with the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the enormous windows. Inside the boardroom, Gregory Collins stood beside a presentation screen, displaying colorful charts climbing confidently upward. One arrow pointed toward the future, another pointed toward profit. Neither pointed toward people. Evelyn lowered her eyes for a moment. She had spent decades learning that numbers could tell the truth. They could also hide it. The board members laughed again. Someone poured fresh coffee. Another executive leaned back comfortably in a leather chair that cost more than the monthly mortgage payment on the first building Sterling Civic Bank had ever occupied. That thought brought an unexpected smile to Evelyn's face. Not because she found it amusing, because she remembered those early days with startling clarity. There had been no marble floors, no digital displays, no executive dining room. Only a cramped storefront on Chicago's South Side with faded brick walls, second-hand desks, and windows that rattled every time the elevated train passed overhead. Michael Harper used to joke that the building leaned slightly to the left whenever the wind blew hard enough. She had laughed every single time. The memory arrived so naturally that, for a brief second, she could almost hear his voice. "People think banks are built with money," Michael had once said while balancing a stack of loan applications on a tiny metal desk. "They're not. They're built with trust." She remembered looking up from an aging calculator. "And if we lose that?" Michael had shrugged. "Then we don't deserve the building." The memory faded as quickly as it had come. When Evelyn opened her eyes again, she found herself staring across the lobby. Something felt wrong. Not because the building had grown. Growth had always been the dream. It was something quieter, something harder to explain. She slowly stood and walked toward the opposite wall. Years earlier, this section of the lobby had been the heart of the building. Customers often stopped there before heading upstairs. Families took photographs. New employees gathered around it during orientation. Now, there was nothing. Only smooth white stone. An enormous abstract sculpture of polished steel occupied the center where framed photographs once hung. Evelyn looked carefully across the empty wall. She remembered every photograph that had disappeared. One showed neighborhood grocery owner Samuel Jenkins holding the keys to his first expanded location after Sterling approved a loan no larger bank would touch. Another captured nurses from a struggling community clinic celebrating the refinancing that kept their doors open. There had been one of Michael standing beside her on opening day, both of them covered in dust after carrying furniture upstairs themselves because they couldn't afford movers. Gone, every one of them. In their place hung a glowing slogan projected across a digital display. Building tomorrow's wealth. The words were beautiful. They were also incomplete. Rachel Torres emerged from a nearby office carrying another stack of folders. She noticed Evelyn studying the wall. Beautiful renovation, isn't it? Evelyn looked toward her. It certainly changed. Rachel smiled. The redesign won a National Architecture Award. I'm sure it did. Rachel followed Evelyn's gaze. Are you looking for something? There used to be photographs here. Rachel frowned politely. I've only worked here a little over 2 years. I've heard there were several remodels before I arrived. Evelyn nodded. I'm sure there were. Rachel shifted the folders in her arms. I'm sorry you're still waiting. The board meetings can run longer than expected. I have nowhere else I need to be. The answer surprised Rachel. Most visitors checked watches, made phone calls, complained. This woman seemed almost peaceful, not impatient, not nervous, simply observant. Rachel started to leave before pausing. Can I at least bring you some coffee? That's kind of you. But no, thank you. Rachel hesitated another moment before returning upstairs. Something about the conversation stayed with her. She couldn't explain why. Across the lobby, an elderly maintenance contractor slowly pushed a supply cart toward a service elevator. His gray uniform bore the name Leonard stitched neatly above one pocket. The wheels of the cart squeaked softly with every turn. He smiled as he passed Evelyn. She smiled back. Neither said anything. It felt unnecessary. Inside the boardroom, applause broke. Gregory Collins clicked to another presentation slide. Although the glass muted most of the conversation, a few phrases drifted faintly through the partially opened door. Streamlining branches, higher shareholder returns, eliminating underperforming locations. Evelyn's expression slowly changed. She knew exactly what those words meant. Branches that served neighborhoods with modest incomes, small business programs, community lending offices. The very places Sterling Civic Bank had been created to protect. The language had become cleaner over the years, less emotional, more corporate, but its consequences remained exactly the same. She turned away from the boardroom. Near the elevators stood another display she had not noticed earlier. It showcased portraits of the bank's leadership team. Gregory Collins occupied the center. Daniel Pierce stood beside him. Regional presidents, senior vice presidents, chief strategy officers. Every photograph carried polished smiles beneath carefully printed biographies. Evelyn read each one quietly. Awards, degrees, achievements. One sentence appeared repeatedly. Under visionary leadership. Under visionary leadership. Under visionary leadership. She searched every panel. Not once did she find Michael Harper's name. Not once did she find her own. It wasn't merely that they had been forgotten. Someone had intentionally rewritten the story. The realization settled heavily inside her. Buildings don't erase history. People do. She reached into her coat pocket and removed a neatly folded handkerchief. Instead of wiping her eyes, she carefully dusted a faint fingerprint from the bronze key hanging beside her portfolio. The metal caught the morning light for only a moment before disappearing beneath her hand again. Nearby, two younger analysts paused beside the coffee station. One glanced toward Evelyn. Do you know who she's waiting for? The other shrugged. No idea. Maybe facilities. Maybe. Neither lowered their voices. Neither sounded cruel, only indifferent. They collected their coffee and walked away. Evelyn watched them disappear around the corner. She wasn't angry. She had spent too many years living inside rooms where people formed opinions before introductions. Sometimes because she was black. Sometimes because she was a woman. Sometimes because she was both. The habit no longer surprised her. It saddened her. Inside the conference room, Gregory approached the large windows overlooking downtown. He gestured confidently toward the skyline while speaking to the directors. Every face around the table reflected certainty. No hesitation, no disagreement. Only Harold Benson sat unusually still. His legal folder remained unopened. His eyes wandered toward the hallway more often than toward the presentation. For the briefest moment, he looked through the glass. His gaze crossed Evelyn's. He froze. Recognition flickered across his face. It disappeared almost immediately. He lowered his eyes, then looked back toward Gregory without saying a word. Evelyn felt something tighten quietly inside her. Harold knew, he remembered, yet he remained seated. Outside the boardroom, silence settled once more. Rain continued falling beyond the enormous windows. The city moved, the meeting moved, history moved. Only Evelyn remained exactly where she was, patient, still, watching. Then Rachel returned, carrying additional presentation binders. As she walked past Evelyn, something finally caught her attention. Not the woman herself, not even the portfolio. It was the old framed architectural drawing hanging beside the executive hallway. Evelyn wasn't merely looking at it. She was tracing its lines with her eyes as though she already knew every hallway, every office, every hidden room inside the building before it had ever been built. Rachel slowed. She looked from the drawing to Evelyn and back again. A strange feeling settled over her. How could a complete stranger study that blueprint, like someone remembering home? Rachel Torres stood perfectly still in the hallway, the stack of presentation binders suddenly feeling much heavier in her arms. She looked from the faded architectural drawing to Evelyn Brooks once more. The blueprint had hung there for years, largely unnoticed by everyone who hurried past it. It showed the original layout of Sterling Civic Bank before the tower had been expanded. Every office, every staircase, every conference room sketched in neat blue ink beneath protective glass. Most employees treated it like decoration. Evelyn studied it like memory. Rachel finally forced herself to continue walking. The board meeting could not wait. Still, something refused to settle inside her. She had spent 2 years learning every executive's preferences. She knew Gregory Collins liked Colombian coffee after 10. Daniel Pierce hated interruptions. She knew which directors argued before every quarterly vote, and which ones nodded no matter what was presented. Yet this quiet woman waiting outside the boardroom somehow felt more connected to the building than any of them. Rachel pushed the thought aside. There was work to do. As she entered the conference room, Gregory barely looked up. Rachel, leave the updated projections. She placed the folders around the table. Gregory continued speaking. Once the acquisition closes, we'll consolidate 27 community branches into regional centers. Daniel Pierce clicked another slide. Operating expenses fall almost immediately. One director frowned. What about the neighborhoods losing those branches? Daniel answered without hesitation. Digital banking has changed customer behavior. Another executive laughed lightly. People adapt. The room moved on. Rachel quietly left. The words followed her into the hallway. People adapt. She looked toward Evelyn. The older woman remained seated peacefully. Outside, rain continued sliding down the enormous windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. A delivery worker pushed a cart stacked with office supplies through the lobby below. Two security guards chatted near the revolving doors. The world continued exactly as it had an hour earlier. Only Rachel seemed unable to shake the feeling that something important was unfolding directly in front of her. She walked toward the reception desk. The receptionist glanced up. "Still here?" Rachel nodded. "The lady outside the boardroom." "The one waiting?" "Yes." The receptionist shrugged. "I figured she'd leave eventually." Rachel hesitated. "Did she ever tell you her name?" "I don't think so." "You didn't ask?" "I asked who she wanted to see." Rachel realized that was true. Nobody had actually asked who Evelyn was, only who she was looking for. It seemed like such a small difference. Now it suddenly felt enormous. Before Rachel could think further, movement near the executive elevators caught her attention. Leonard, the elderly maintenance contractor she'd seen earlier, was pushing a large utility cart toward the service corridor. The front wheel caught on the edge of a floor mat. The cart lurched sideways. Several heavy tool cases slid toward the floor. Leonard reached instinctively to stop them. His knees buckled. For a brief moment it looked as though both he and the cart might collapse together. Employees nearby looked over. No one moved. One young manager frowned sympathetically before checking his phone again. Another stepped around the scattered tools without slowing. The hallway remained strangely quiet. Then Evelyn stood. She crossed the polished floor without urgency, but without hesitation. "Easy now," she said gently. Her voice carried the calm confidence of someone who had helped people far more often than she had asked for help herself. Leonard smiled with visible embarrassment. "I've got it. I know you do. But you don't have to do it alone." Together they steadied the cart. One toolbox had fallen completely onto the marble floor. Evelyn bent first. Leonard immediately protested. "No, ma'am. You don't need to. It's all right." She lifted the heavy case with both hands and placed it carefully back onto the cart. Another smaller case remained near the wall. Rachel instinctively stepped forward. "I'll get that." She picked it up and handed it to Leonard. "Thank you." He smiled warmly. His weathered face relaxed. "You two just saved me from explaining another broken toolbox." Evelyn laughed softly. "It looks like you've carried enough for one morning." Leonard rubbed one knee. "They don't make these joints the way they used to." "No, they don't." Rachel noticed something unusual. Leonard wasn't speaking to Evelyn the way employees usually spoke to strangers. There was genuine warmth, respect, almost familiarity. "You sure you're all right?" Evelyn asked. "I'll survive." Leonard chuckled. "My doctor keeps reminding me I'm not 30 anymore. You should listen." "My wife tells me the same thing every day." Evelyn smiled. "Then you've got two wise people giving you good advice." Leonard laughed. "So it seems." He carefully adjusted the cart before looking directly at Evelyn. "It's good seeing you." Rachel blinked. "Good seeing you?" "Not, nice meeting you." Evelyn answered just as naturally. "You too, Leonard. Take care of yourself." "I will." The elderly contractor disappeared slowly down the service hallway. Rachel watched until he turned the corner. Something didn't add up. If Evelyn were merely a visitor, how did she know the maintenance contractor's name? She looked back. Evelyn had quietly returned to the chair outside the boardroom exactly as though nothing unusual had happened. No dramatic gesture, no expectation of gratitude. Just quiet kindness. Rachel walked over. "You know Leonard?" Evelyn looked up. "For quite a while." "Does he still volunteer on Saturdays?" Rachel frowned. "Volunteer?" Evelyn paused. A faint smile crossed her face. "I suppose things change." Rachel hesitated. "I'm not sure what you mean." "It's nothing." Silence settled between them. Rachel studied Evelyn more carefully than before. There was nothing expensive about her clothing, nothing designed to impress. Yet every movement carried remarkable confidence. She sat comfortably in surroundings that intimidated most visitors. She never looked lost, never looked uncertain, never once asked where anything was, almost as though she had walked these hallways hundreds of times. Rachel found herself asking another question. "Would you like some water?" "That would be nice." Rachel returned moments later carrying a glass. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Their fingers briefly touched as Evelyn accepted it. Rachel noticed the bronze key again. This time she looked directly at it. Old, handcrafted. Its edges had been polished smooth through decades of use. "Interesting key." Evelyn glanced down. "It opens something important." Rachel smiled politely. "I imagine it does." She expected Evelyn to explain further. She didn't. The hallway fell quiet once more. Inside the boardroom, another burst of applause echoed faintly through the glass. Gregory Collins stood shaking hands with Daniel Pierce. Several directors smiled broadly. Whatever agreement they were celebrating seemed almost complete. Rachel looked back toward Evelyn. The older woman's eyes rested on the boardroom with quiet sadness rather than anger, as though she were watching someone slowly dismantle a house she had once loved. Rachel couldn't explain why that thought suddenly entered her mind. It simply did. Across the lobby, another employee approached. Middle-aged, human resources. He leaned toward Rachel. "Still waiting on that lady?" "Yes." "Any idea who she is?" Rachel surprised herself before she answered. "No, I don't. But I think we should have asked." The HR manager looked confused. "Asked what?" Rachel watched Evelyn gently straighten the old leather portfolio resting across her knees. The bronze key caught another beam of morning light. For reasons she still couldn't explain, Rachel no longer believed she was looking at an ordinary visitor. She stood beside the reception counter for several seconds, watching Evelyn Brooks through the flow of employees moving between elevators and offices. The older woman had returned to stillness, the glass of water untouched beside her. The worn portfolio balanced across her knees, and nothing about her demanded attention. Yet Rachel found herself unable to look away. The bronze key rested against the cracked leather like a secret waiting for the right moment. Inside the boardroom, Gregory Collins's voice rose with renewed confidence. The door had not closed completely after the last delivery of documents. A narrow gap remained between the heavy frame and the glass wall, allowing fragments of the meeting to drift into the hallway. Not final approval before noon. Executive retention package. No unnecessary delays. Rachel heard enough to know the directors were approaching a vote. She also noticed Evelyn heard it too. The older woman's posture did not change, but her fingers slowly closed around the edge of the portfolio. Rachel moved closer to the boardroom under the excuse of checking the refreshment table. Through the glass, Daniel Pierce stood near the presentation screen with a silver pointer in his hand. Behind him glowed the blue and gold logo of Caraway Financial Group. Rachel knew the name. Everyone in banking did. Caraway specialized in buying regional institutions, combining departments, selling real estate, and closing branches that failed to meet aggressive profit targets. Its executives called the process modernization. Neighborhoods usually called it abandonment. Daniel clicked to the next slide. A map of Chicago appeared, dotted with small red circles. "These 27 branches represent nearly 19% of our operating expense," he said. "But together they generate less than 6% of annual profit." A director near the middle of the table leaned forward. "Those locations serve some of our oldest customers." Daniel smiled without warmth. "Oldest does not mean most valuable." Several people chuckled. Outside the room, Evelyn's eyes lowered. Rachel felt the words strike the hallway like a draft of cold air. Gregory rested both hands on the table. Caraway will absorb the profitable branches and convert the rest to digital service zones. Customers will still have online access. Harold Benson finally spoke. His voice was lower than the others. Many of those customers are elderly. Others don't have reliable internet access. Daniel barely glanced at him. Then they will need to adjust. Harold's face tightened. Gregory continued before the silence could grow uncomfortable. We are not running a charity. We are running a financial institution. The statement landed harder than he seemed to realize. Evelyn looked toward the boardroom. For the first time all morning, pain showed plainly in her face. Not outrage, grief. Sterling Civic Bank had been built because larger institutions had used those exact words. Not profitable enough. Too risky. Let them adjust. She had heard them when her own mother was denied a small business loan, despite 15 years of steady income, from a neighborhood laundry. She had heard them when Michael Harper's father lost the family hardware store after a national bank refused to extend a loan by 30 days. Those wounds had created Sterling. Now the people running it were repeating the language that had once made its existence necessary. Rachel saw Evelyn's expression and felt something inside her shift. This was no longer curiosity. It was concern. Inside the room, Daniel advanced the presentation. A new heading appeared. Executive Continuity Incentives. Numbers filled the screen. Gregory would receive $17 million if the merger closed. Daniel would receive 12. Several senior directors would collect packages worth between $2 and $5 million each. One director gave a low whistle. Another smiled and adjusted his cuffs. Harold did not move. Rachel stared through the glass. She had prepared portions of the meeting schedule, but she had never seen this slide. Neither had most of the board. Daniel spoke quickly, wrapping greed in respectable language. These incentives ensure leadership stability during the transition. Naturally, one director said. Laughter moved around the table. Evelyn rose slowly from her chair. Rachel turned toward her. Ma'am? Evelyn walked closer to the glass wall. From there, the presentation reflected faintly across her face. Red branch closures, blue profit projections, gold compensation figures. The colors made the room look festive. The reality was anything but. Gregory lifted a thick document from the table. Once we authorize the letter of intent, Caraway's legal team can begin the final process immediately. Harold opened his folder at last. He did not look at the contract. Instead, he looked toward Evelyn. Their eyes met again. This time, recognition could not be hidden. His face lost color. He glanced toward Gregory, then toward the document in Gregory's hands. His lips parted. No words came. Evelyn watched him retreat into silence. She remembered Harold 23 years earlier, a young art attorney working from a folding table in the back room of their first branch. He had believed fiercely in the bank's mission. He had once slept in his office for 3 nights while fighting an illegal foreclosure against a retired factory worker. That man was still somewhere inside him. But fear had buried him. Rachel noticed the exchange. You know, Mr. Benson, she said quietly. Evelyn did not answer at once. I knew a man who looked like him. Rachel waited. Evelyn's gaze remained on Harold. I'm not certain that man is still here. Inside, Daniel handed Gregory a black pen. Gregory uncapped it. Harold finally raised one hand. Before we proceed, I need to repeat my objection for the record. Gregory's expression cooled. Your concerns have been noted. I don't believe the founding charter allows us to abandon the community lending mission without special review. Daniel leaned back. The charter was written when Sterling had 3 branches and a staff of 40. It still governs us. It guides us, Daniel corrected. It does not imprison us. Harold looked around the table for support. No one met his eyes. One director studied his coffee. Another shuffled papers. A third stared at the skyline. The crowd inside the room was no braver than the employees outside it. Gregory placed the pen against the signature line. "Are there any formal motions to delay?" Silence. Harold's shoulders sank. Gregory smiled. "Then we move forward." The tip of the pen touched paper. Outside, Evelyn stepped toward the partially open door. Rachel instinctively moved with her. Before either reached it, Daniel's voice drifted clearly into the hallway. "By the time the public understands what happened, the branches will already be closed and the properties sold." Several men laughed. Gregory replied, "That's why timing matters." Evelyn stopped. The warmth disappeared completely from her face. Rachel had seen disappointment there before. Now she saw decision. The bronze key swung once against the portfolio as Evelyn turned away from the boardroom. Not toward the elevators, not toward the lobby. Toward the older section of the executive floor, where the lighting was dimmer and the hallway narrowed past unused offices and locked storage rooms. Rachel followed for several steps. "Where are you going?" Evelyn kept walking. To find something they chose to forget. At the end of the hall stood a heavy oak door, almost hidden behind a decorative partition and a tall potted tree. A tarnished brass plate read, "Founders Archive." Rachel had passed the door hundreds of times. She had never seen it open. Facilities claimed the original lock was obsolete. The digital master key did not work. Gregory had once ordered the room sealed until renovation plans were approved. Evelyn stopped before it. For the third time that morning, she touched the bronze key. Only now did Rachel understand. It was not decoration. It belonged to this door. Behind them, muffled applause erupted from the boardroom. The vote had begun. Evelyn removed the key from the leather strap and held it between her fingers. Its worn teeth caught the pale hallway light. Rachel's breath tightened. "Who are you?" Evelyn looked at the sealed room, then at the boardroom, where men were preparing to dismantle everything Sterling Civic Bank had once promised to protect. Her voice remained gentle. "Someone who waited long enough." She slid the bronze key into the lock, and somewhere deep inside the old oak door, a mechanism that had not moved in years began to turn. The sound was small, a metal click, a soft scrape. Yet in the quiet hallway, it seemed louder than the applause still leaking from the boardroom behind them. Rachel Torres stared at the key. Facilities had tried digital overrides. Locksmiths had examined the old brass plate. Gregory Collins had once joked that the room probably held nothing but dust and expired contracts. Evelyn turned the key one final inch. The lock released. She rested her palm against the dark wood and pushed. At first, the door resisted. Its hinges gave a tired groan, as though the room itself had grown accustomed to being forgotten. Then it opened inward, releasing a breath of cool, stale air scented with paper, cedar, and years of silence. Rachel remained at the threshold. The archive was larger than she expected. Tall shelves lined 3 walls. Their glass doors were clouded with dust, but the binders inside had been arranged with care. A long wooden table occupied the center of the room beneath a brass reading lamp. Near the far wall stood 2 old filing cabinets and a framed black and white photograph turned slightly crooked. Nothing resembled the sleek offices outside. There were no screens, no polished slogans, no portraits of Gregory Collins, only the remains of another Sterling Civic Bank. Evelyn stepped inside. Her shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. Rachel saw it. This room did not make Evelyn feel like a visitor. It received her like someone returning after a long absence. A soft strip of morning light slipped through a narrow window, revealing dust floating in the air. Evelyn walked toward the central table and placed her portfolio down with both hands. Rachel finally entered. "How did you know the key would still work?" Evelyn looked toward the shelves. Michael believed electronic systems made people careless. "Michael Harper?" "Yes." The name carried warmth when she spoke it. Rachel glanced toward the open hallway. The boardroom remained visible in the distance, though no one inside seemed to have noticed them leave. You knew him personally. Evelyn gave her a quiet look. I knew him before this bank had enough money to replace a broken front window. Rachel felt another piece of the mystery shift into place. Evelyn crossed to the crooked photograph. She lifted it from the wall and wiped the glass with the edge of her handkerchief. The picture showed two adults standing beneath a hand-painted sign outside a narrow storefront. A younger black woman wore rolled shirt sleeves and held a cardboard box against one hip. Beside her stood a lanky white man with wind-blown hair and a grin too large for his face. Both looked exhausted. Both looked happy. The sign above them read, Sterling Community Financial Opening Day. Rachel stepped closer. The younger woman's face was familiar. Not because Rachel remembered seeing it in the building, because she was standing beside it now. Rachel looked at Evelyn, then back at the photograph. Her voice dropped. That's you. Evelyn returned the frame to the wall. Yes. The answer was calm, almost ordinary. Rachel's mind raced. She remembered orientation materials describing Michael Harper as Sterling's visionary founder. Gregory often spoke about carrying forward Harper's legacy. His name appeared in annual reports, anniversary videos, and carefully edited speeches. Evelyn Brooks was never mentioned. Not once. Why isn't your photograph in the lobby? It used to be. What happened? Evelyn looked through the open door toward the white marble wall outside. Someone decided the company's history was easier to manage with fewer people in it. Rachel felt heat rise in her face. Every careless assumption she had made that morning returned at once. The plain coat, the old portfolio, the wait outside the boardroom, her own voice saying, "You can wait over there." "I'm sorry," she whispered. Evelyn did not respond immediately. She walked toward the shelves and removed a ring of smaller keys from a hook hidden behind the photograph. "You did not know who I was. That doesn't make it better." "No." Evelyn unlocked one of the glass cabinets. "It does not." There was no cruelty in her answer. That made it harder for Rachel to hear. Inside the cabinet sat rows of leather-bound journals, thick folders tied with cotton ribbon, and metal document boxes labeled by year. Evelyn selected a dark green journal. The leather had cracked along the spine. She opened it carefully. Handwritten notes covered the first page. Michael's sharp, slanted writing filled the left side. Evelyn's smaller, more precise handwriting filled the right. Rachel read the heading, Founding Principles. Beneath it were 5 short commitments. Every customer will be seen. Every applicant will be heard. No community will be abandoned solely because serving it is less profitable. Leadership will remain accountable to the people affected by its decisions. Dignity will never be treated as a luxury. Rachel swallowed. Those words felt painfully different from the conversation taking place down the hallway. Evelyn traced one line with her finger. "We wrote this at 2 a.m. after a bank rejected our first loan application." "Why?" "They said Michael had no meaningful collateral." She gave a faint smile. "They said I was not the kind of person investors trusted with other people's money." Rachel looked down. "What did you do?" "We found a retired union accountant willing to lend us $12,000. "Was that enough?" "No." Evelyn's smile deepened slightly. "But it was enough to begin." She closed the journal and placed it on the table. Then she removed several other items. Original board minutes, early lending agreements, letters from neighborhood business owners, a faded newspaper clipping celebrating Sterling's first branch opening. Each document restored a piece of history the new building had hidden. Rachel moved slowly around the table, overwhelmed by the evidence of a company she had never been taught to understand. "Why did you leave all of this locked away?" "I didn't." Evelyn opened a lower cabinet. "I left it protected. Inside sat a long metal box secured with two latches. A white label had been typed across its top. Founding Governance Sealed Copies. Evelyn rested her hand on it. Michael and I knew a day might come when people with expensive titles would confuse management with ownership. Rachel glanced toward the boardroom. Is this about the merger? It is about what the merger reveals. Evelyn opened the box. Inside were several sealed envelopes, notarized agreements, and a thick document bound in dark blue cloth. Sterling Civic Bank Charter. Rachel's breathing slowed. The object did not look dramatic. No gold lettering, no polished cover. Yet Evelyn handled it with more care than Gregory handled any document in the boardroom. She opened to the first pages. Two signatures appeared beneath the incorporation statement. Michael Harper, Evelyn Brooks. Rachel stared. The signatures were unmistakable. A third line listed ownership percentages. Michael Harper, 39%. Evelyn Brooks, 51%. Community Employee Trust, 10%. Rachel read the numbers twice. You own the bank. I own the controlling interest. But Gregory is the chief executive. An employee. Daniel? Also an employee. Rachel slowly lowered herself into one of the wooden chairs. The men celebrating inside the glass room did not merely work in Evelyn's former company. They worked in her company, and they had made her sit in the hallway. A heavy quiet settled over the archive. Then another memory struck Rachel. Harold Benson's pale face, his refusal to meet Evelyn's eyes. He recognized you. Yes. And he said nothing. Evelyn closed the charter. Fear can make decent people participate in indecent things. Rachel looked toward the hallway. What are you going to do? Evelyn studied her for a moment. That depends on what they have already done. From the boardroom came the faint sound of chairs shifting. The meeting was moving toward another stage. Evelyn opened a sealed envelope bearing Michael Harper's signature across the flap. Inside was a shorter document. Its header read, Permanent Mission Protection Provision. Rachel leaned closer. Several paragraphs described emergency authority retained by the controlling founder if bank leadership attempted to abandon its community obligations for personal benefit. Near the bottom appeared one handwritten note. Evelyn, if they ever forget why the doors were opened, use this before they close them on everyone else. Rachel felt a chill move across her skin. This can stop the sale? It can stop more than the sale. Before Evelyn could explain, hurried footsteps sounded in the hallway. A man's voice called Rachel's name. She recognized Daniel Pierce's senior aide. Rachel, Mr. Collins wants the final voting certificates. Rachel turned toward the open archive door. The aide appeared several yards away, then stopped when he saw where she was standing. His eyes widened. That room is restricted. Evelyn calmly slid the mission provision into her portfolio. So is the decision they are making. The aide frowned. Who are you? Rachel stood. For the first time that morning, she did not step aside. She is not someone you order out of this building. The words surprised all three of them. The aide looked from Rachel to Evelyn, unsure whether to laugh or report them. Behind him, Gregory's voice carried from the boardroom. Where are those certificates? The aide turned. I'm getting them now. He hurried away. Rachel looked back at Evelyn. The shame in her expression had been replaced by urgency. They're about to take the final vote. Evelyn placed the charter, Michael's handwritten provision, and several original board records inside the old portfolio. Then she closed it. The brass clasp snapped shut. Then they should know whose company they are voting on. Rachel glanced once more at the photograph near the wall. The young woman outside the storefront. The woman everyone upstairs had erased. She read the signature on the charter again. Evelyn Brooks, controlling founder, permanent majority owner. The truth was no longer hidden in the locked room. It was standing directly in front of her. Rachel moved toward the hallway, then stopped and looked back. What should I call you? Evelyn lifted the portfolio. My name would be a good place to start. Rachel nodded. This time she understood the full weight of the answer. From the boardroom, Gregory Collins called impatiently for the vote to begin. Rachel looked toward the glass doors, then at the woman whose name had been removed from her own history. A decision formed on her face. I'll stop them. She turned and ran toward the boardroom. Behind her, Evelyn Brooks stepped out of the archive carrying the documents that could bring an entire empire to its feet. Rachel's shoes struck the marble in sharp, urgent beats. The glass-walled conference room grew larger with every step. Inside, Gregory Collins stood at the head of the table with one hand resting on the merger agreement. Daniel Pierce sat beside him, already wearing the satisfied expression of a man counting money that had not yet reached his account. Around them, board members shifted papers into neat stacks. Pens waited beside signature lines. Harold Benson sat rigidly at the far end, his face drawn and tired. Gregory looked toward the door. Rachel. His voice carried through the narrow opening. Where are the voting certificates? Rachel pushed the door open. The conversation stopped. 12 faces turned toward her. She had interrupted meetings before, but never this one. Never while Gregory Collins was finalizing the most important transaction of his career. For half a second, fear caught in her chest. Then she remembered Evelyn sitting alone in the hallway. She remembered Leonard's toolbox falling while everyone stepped around him. She remembered the words written in the founder's journal. Every customer will be seen. Every applicant will be heard. Dignity will never be treated as a luxury. We need to stop the vote, Rachel said. Daniel Pierce leaned back in his chair. Excuse me? The vote cannot continue. Gregory's expression hardened. Rachel, bring me the certificates and leave the room. I can't do that. The silence sharpened. A director near the windows glanced at another, as though wondering whether Rachel had suffered some sudden breakdown. Daniel gave a small laugh. You are an executive assistant. Yes, Rachel's voice trembled slightly, but she continued, and I'm telling you, there is information this board has not seen. Gregory stepped away from the table. Whatever this is, it can wait. No, sir. It cannot. His jaw tightened. Who put you up to this? Rachel looked toward the hallway. The answer appeared before she could speak. Evelyn entered carrying the old leather portfolio. She walked slowly, not because she lacked urgency, but because she did not need to hurry. The room seemed to change around her. The polished table, the glowing screens, the tall windows holding the gray Chicago skyline. Everything remained the same, yet the confidence inside the room suddenly felt less secure. Gregory stared at Evelyn. Recognition did not come, only irritation. This is the woman from the hallway. Daniel looked toward Rachel. You interrupted the board because of her? Rachel moved aside. Evelyn stepped fully into the room and let the glass door close behind her. The bronze key rested against the portfolio once more. Harold Benson saw it. His face went pale. His hands tightened around the edge of the table. Gregory noticed none of it. Ma'am, he said, controlling his voice with visible effort. This is a private executive session. Evelyn looked around the room. No one offered her a chair. No one greeted her. Several directors studied her coat and old portfolio with the same quick judgment she had seen all morning. One man whispered something to the director beside him. Daniel heard it and smirked. Evelyn noticed. She said nothing. Gregory continued. You were told to wait outside. I waited. Then you were told this meeting could not be disturbed. No. Evelyn's voice remained calm. I was told the meeting was important. She looked toward the merger agreement. You were right about that. Daniel closed his folder. Security can handle this. He reached toward the conference phone. Rachel stepped forward. Please don't. Daniel looked at her sharply. You are already dangerously close to losing your position. The words hit Rachel with their intended force. She had rent due, a car payment, an aging mother recovering from surgery in Cicero. She had spent years fighting for the opportunity to sit near rooms like this one. Daniel knew all of that. His threat was not careless. It was precise. Rachel felt fear rise again. Evelyn turned toward her. Their eyes met. There was no command in Evelyn's expression, no demand that Rachel sacrifice herself, only quiet recognition. Rachel straightened. Then I lose it. Daniel's face changed. Gregory looked between them. So, this has gone far enough. He pressed a button on the conference phone. Security to the executive boardroom. Harold finally moved. Gregory. His voice came out low. Gregory ignored him. Security to the executive boardroom immediately. Evelyn walked toward the table. Two directors pushed their chairs back, not because she threatened them, but because her calmness made them uncertain. She passed behind Daniel. He turned to watch her. At the head of the table stood Gregory's chair. Dark leather, high-backed, positioned slightly above the others. Evelyn stopped beside it. Her fingers brushed the carved wooden edge. A memory crossed her face. Michael Harper standing beside the same chair years earlier, laughing after refusing to sit at the head of the table during the bank's first formal board meeting. Put it in the middle, he had said. There shouldn't be a throne in a place built on trust. The board had laughed then. Evelyn had laughed too. After Michael died, Gregory moved the chair to the head of the room. No one had moved it back. Gregory watched her touch it. Step away from my seat. Evelyn looked at him. The room grew still. Even Daniel stopped smiling. Evelyn's voice was quiet enough that everyone had to listen carefully. Who gave you permission to sit in Michael Harper's chair? The question landed with unexpected weight. Gregory blinked. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in his face. How do you know whose chair that was? Evelyn rested the portfolio on the table. I remember when he bought it. Daniel shook his head. This is absurd. Harold's breathing became audible. A director turned toward him. Harold? He did not answer. His eyes remained fixed on Evelyn. Gregory recovered. Michael Harper has been gone for years. Yes. Evelyn said the word without bitterness. Only sorrow. And in his absence, you removed his photograph. Gregory stiffened. You rewrote the founding history. That is not relevant to this meeting. You abandoned the neighborhoods this bank was created to serve. We modernized our operations. You prepared to sell the institution to a company that will close branches, dismiss employees, and strip the remaining assets. Daniel stood abruptly. You have no standing to make these accusations. Evelyn looked at him. I have more standing than anyone in this room. The glass door opened. Two security guards entered. The first was Thomas Reed, the same guard who had opened the lobby gate for executives that morning without asking Evelyn's name. Beside him stood a younger officer named Marcus Bell. Both stopped when they saw the scene. Gregory pointed toward Evelyn. Remove her. Neither guard moved immediately. Thomas looked at Rachel, then at Harold, then at the woman standing beside the chairman's chair. Evelyn met his eyes. You may stay. Gregory's face reddened. She does not give orders here. Evelyn turned back toward him. Not yet. Daniel stepped around the table. That's enough. He pointed toward the door. Leave this room now, or you will be charged with trespassing. Evelyn opened the portfolio. The brass clasp released with a soft snap. She removed the green leather journal first, then the original incorporation documents, then the sealed mission protection provision bearing Michael Harper's signature. She placed them carefully on the table. The old paper looked almost fragile beneath the bright conference lights, yet no one laughed. Harold stared at the first page. His chair scraped backward. He stood. Every person in the room turned toward him. Gregory's voice sharpened. "Sit down, Harold." Harold did not. 25 years of legal work seemed to pass across his face in a few seconds. The storefront offices, the emergency loans, Michael's funeral. The first time Gregory ordered him to bury a complaint. The years of telling himself silence was caution. The morning he recognized Evelyn and chose fear again. He looked at her. "I'm sorry." Gregory struck the table with his palm. "What is going on?" Harold looked toward the directors. His voice was weak at first, then steadier. "You should all read the signature on that charter." Daniel grabbed the document. His eyes moved quickly across the page. The confidence drained from his face. Gregory took it from him. He read the first line, then the ownership section. His lips tightened. "No." The word barely escaped. One director leaned forward. "What does it say?" Gregory did not answer. Evelyn did. "My name is Evelyn Brooks." Several faces changed at once. One director's hand slipped from his pen. Another whispered, "The founder?" Rachel watched recognition spread around the room in waves. Some remembered old articles. Some recalled archived training videos. Some had only seen the name in footnotes beneath financial reports. Harold spoke clearly now. "She founded Sterling Civic Bank with Michael Harper." Daniel stepped back from the table. Evelyn continued, "I hold 51% controlling ownership." Thomas Reed, the security guard, slowly lowered his hand from his radio. Marcus Bell straightened. No one had been told to stand, but something moved through the room. A director nearest the window rose first, then another. A third followed, uncertain but unable to remain seated. Chairs scraped across the floor one by one. Within seconds, nearly everyone around the table was on their feet. Gregory remained standing at the head because he had never sat down. But now his posture looked different. No longer commanding, cornered. The woman kept waiting outside her own boardroom, had entered as a stranger. Now the entire room stood before her. Only Daniel remained seated. He looked around, then rose slowly when he realized he was alone. Evelyn did not smile. She did not enjoy their fear. She looked at the faces before her and saw not victory, but proof of how easily dignity appeared once power became visible. Gregory placed both hands on the table. "Ownership does not give you operational authority." His voice sounded strained, but the argument gave him something to hold. "You stepped away from management years ago. The board governs this institution now." Daniel seized the opening. "He's right." He looked toward the directors. "Ms. Brooks may be a majority shareholder, but she cannot simply walk into an executive session and overturn a lawful transaction." The room's uncertainty returned. Several directors exchanged glances. Harold looked down at the mission provision. He knew what came next. Evelyn closed the portfolio. Then she reached into her coat pocket and removed her phone. Gregory watched the movement. His face tightened. Evelyn placed the phone on the table beside the founding charter. "You are correct about one thing, Mr. Collins." The room waited. She'd looked directly at him. Ownership alone would not be enough. Her thumb hovered over a number already entered on the screen. "But Michael and I prepared for men who might one day believe that." She pressed the call button, and as the line began to ring, Gregory Collins finally understood that learning her name had not been the worst part of his morning. The sound carried through the boardroom in slow, measured pulses. One ring, then another. No one sat down. The directors remained standing around the long walnut table, uncertain whether respect, fear, or simple embarrassment had lifted them from their chairs. Rain streaked the windows behind Gregory, turning the Chicago skyline into a blurred field of steel and gray light. Daniel Pierce watched the phone as though he could stop the call by staring hard enough. Evelyn Brooks stood beside Michael Harper's old chair, her hand resting near the original charter. She had no need to raise her voice. The documents had already begun speaking for her. The line clicked. A woman answered. Office of the Independent Corporate Secretary. Margaret Ellis speaking. Evelyn's expression softened slightly. Good morning, Margaret. A brief silence followed. Then the woman's tone changed. Ms. Brooks? Several directors exchanged startled looks. Margaret Ellis was known throughout the bank as one of the few officers who reported directly to the independent board rather than the executive leadership team. Gregory had tried more than once to reduce her authority. He had never succeeded. Yes, Evelyn said. I'm in the executive boardroom at Sterling headquarters. Another pause. I was not informed you were visiting. No one was. Gregory shifted his weight. Evelyn, he began, trying to sound reasonable now. There is no need to turn this into a performance. She looked at him. It became a performance when you made a woman wait outside her own boardroom while you sold her bank. The words landed quietly. That made them impossible to escape. Margaret's voice came through the speaker. Ms. Brooks, are members of executive leadership present? Gregory Collins and Daniel Pierce are both here. Is General Counsel Harold Benson present? Harold stood straighter. I am. Mr. Benson, can you confirm the identity of the controlling founder? Harold looked at Evelyn. There was shame in his eyes, but something else had begun replacing it. Courage. I confirm that the woman in this room is Evelyn Brooks, co-founder of Sterling Civic Bank and holder of 51% controlling ownership. Daniel's jaw tightened. Gregory turned toward him. Neither spoke. Margaret continued. And are the original governance documents available for review? Evelyn opened the dark blue charter and placed Michael's signed mission provision beside it. They are on the table. Please read the title of the sealed provision. Evelyn looked down. Permanent Mission Protection Provision. A director near the windows whispered, I've never heard of that. Harold answered without looking away from the document. You were never meant to need it. Gregory stepped forward. This provision is ancient. It predates our current bylaws, our modern operating structure, and nearly every director in this room. Evelyn turned one page. It also survived every amendment you approved. That is a matter of interpretation. No. Harold's voice was firmer now. It is not. Gregory looked at him sharply. Harold opened his legal folder at last. For years, he had carried the bank's rules like a shield for other men. Now he laid them bare. The provision was incorporated into the restated charter 21 years ago. It was reaffirmed during the public restructuring and again during the capital expansion. The board could revise operational bylaws, but the mission protection language required consent from the controlling founder and the employee trust. Daniel looked toward the directors. This is legal theater. One of them, an older woman named Susan Merritt, picked up the charter. She adjusted her glasses and read the highlighted section. Her face grew serious. It says executive authority may temporarily revert to the controlling founder if leadership attempts to transfer ownership in a way that materially abandons the bank's founding community obligations. Daniel crossed his arms. Temporarily. Susan looked at him. That is still authority. Gregory's voice hardened. The sale does not abandon anything. Evelyn glanced toward the red circles still glowing on the presentation screen. 27 branches. Gregory followed her gaze. Underperforming assets. Neighborhood banks. Cost centers. Places where people cash paychecks, apply for business loans, and sit across from someone who knows their name. Daniel gave a humorless laugh. This is sentimental nonsense. Evelyn looked directly at him. My mother once carried 3 years of tax records into 6 banks before anyone would let her finish an application. The room quieted. She owned a laundry. never missed a rent payment, never failed to pay an employee. Every bank told her she did not fit their lending profile. Evelyn's fingers rested against the green founder's journal. Sterling was built because people like her were treated as numbers before anyone bothered to see them as human beings. Daniel looked away first. Margaret's voice returned through the phone. "Miss Brooks, before emergency authority can be recognized, I must ask whether you believe the current executives acted for personal benefit in conflict with the founding mission." Evelyn opened another folder. Inside were printed compensation schedules Rachel had never seen before. 17 million for Gregory, 12 million for Daniel. Additional payments concealed within consulting agreements and retention contracts. She placed the pages beside the merger proposal. "I do." Several directors leaned closer. Susan Merritt picked up the first page. "What is this?" "Personal incentive agreements tied to branch closures and final transfer approval," Evelyn said. Gregory's face darkened. "Those are standard executive retention packages. Then why were they excluded from the board summary?" A silence followed. Susan looked toward Daniel. "Were these disclosed to the audit committee?" Daniel's answer came too quickly. "They were reviewed through the appropriate channel." "That was not my question." He did not answer again. Rachel stood near the glass door, watching the room shift. Only an hour earlier, Gregory and Daniel had seemed untouchable. Now every polished surface reflected something different. Doubt. The security guards remained by the entrance. Thomas Reed looked uncomfortable. He remembered Evelyn approaching the lobby desk in the rain. He remembered greeting the executives by name while letting her stand alone. He had not insulted her. He had not ordered her away. He had simply decided she was less important. The realization weighed on him. Margaret spoke again. "I will need formal confirmation from General Counsel that the conditions for provisional activation are supported by the available evidence." Every face turned toward Harold. This was his moment. Not a dramatic one, no applause, no certainty that choosing correctly would protect him. Gregory stared at him with a warning that had ended many disagreements before they began. Harold's career lived inside that stare. So did 25 years of silence. He looked at Michael's handwriting, then at Evelyn. "I confirm that the conditions appear satisfied." Gregory's face hardened. "You will regret that." Harold nodded slowly. "I already regret waiting this long." Margaret's keyboard clicked faintly over the speaker. "Ms. Brooks, please state your authorization phrase." Gregory turned toward Daniel. A silent calculation passed between them. Daniel reached for his phone. Rachel noticed. "So security can collect devices," she said. Daniel froze. Evelyn looked toward the guards. "Please ask everyone to place company phones on the table until legal preservation is complete." Thomas hesitated only a second. "You heard her." Daniel stared at him. "You work for this bank," Thomas answered quietly. "So does she." Phones appeared one by one. The sound of them touching the walnut table seemed like small stones falling. Evelyn looked at the bronze key beside her portfolio. For years, it had opened one forgotten room. Now, it had opened something larger. She spoke the authorization phrase. "First door, first promise." Margaret repeated it. "First door, first promise." The keyboard clicked again. "Identity confirmed." Gregory stepped closer to the phone. "This process is invalid. I demand outside counsel review before any action is taken." "They are already being notified," Margaret said. "The provision requires immediate recognition pending review, not prior approval." Daniel's face lost color. Margaret continued in the same calm tone. "Effective at 10:52 a.m. Central Time, provisional executive authority is transferred to Evelyn Brooks as controlling founder under the Permanent Mission Protection provision." No one moved. Outside the glass walls, employees had begun gathering in the hallway. Word had spread that something unusual was happening. They stood several yards away, pretending to carry folders or wait for elevators. The same people who had watched Evelyn sit alone now watched her stand at the center of the room. Gregory seemed to hear the silence around him. He looked toward the directors who had once agreed with everything he said. None moved to his side. He forced a cold smile. "Congratulations, you found an old technicality." Evelyn closed the charter. "No. I found the promise you thought no one remembered. You have not run a bank in years. I know. You do not understand what this institution requires now. I understand enough to know you were willing to sell it for $17 million. His smile disappeared. Daniel stood beside him. "You cannot prove wrongdoing from a compensation page." Evelyn reached into the portfolio again. This time she removed a sealed envelope marked with the date from 3 weeks earlier. Harold recognized it. So did Daniel. Evelyn placed it in the center of the table but did not open it. Gregory's eyes fixed on the envelope. "What is that?" "The reason I came to Chicago." For the first time, fear appeared openly in Daniel's face. Rachel saw it. Harold saw it. Evelyn saw it too. She looked around the boardroom at every person who had remained silent while the bank's purpose was traded away. "Sit down," she said. No anger, no triumph, just authority. One by one, the directors returned to their chairs. Gregory remained standing. Evelyn looked toward Michael's old seat, then toward him. "You are in my way." His hands slowly released the chair. He stepped aside. Evelyn did not sit yet. Instead, she opened the sealed envelope and withdrew copies of private emails between Gregory and Daniel. The first page contained a message sent 6 months earlier. "Once the branch plan is approved, Brooks has no practical path back. Her name is history, not power." The second message was shorter. "Then erase the history." Evelyn placed both pages beneath the boardroom lights. The directors read them in silence. Gregory's face turned gray. Daniel lowered himself into his chair. Outside, the hallway crowd grew larger. No one looked away now. Evelyn finally sat in Michael Harper's chair. The leather creaked softly beneath her. She placed both hands on the table and looked at the men who had erased her portrait, buried her mission, and counted on her permanent absence. "Now," she said, "we are going to discuss what else you tried to hide." And from the expression on Daniel Pierce's face, everyone in that room understood that the merger was only the beginning. Evelyn Brooks sat at the head of the table while rain pressed against the windows behind her. The Chicago skyline had nearly disappeared into the storm. Towers rose like shadows beyond the wet glass, and the morning light had dimmed until the boardroom's recessed lamps cast pale circles across the polished wood. No one spoke. The directors who had stood moments earlier were seated again, but the room no longer belonged to Gregory Collins. It no longer followed Daniel Pierce's rhythm. Every eye rested on Evelyn. She opened the sealed envelope. Inside were printed emails, payment schedules, private meeting notes, and copies of messages exchanged through accounts the executives believed had been hidden from the bank's legal system. Evelyn placed the first document in front of Susan Merritt. "Read the highlighted section." Susan adjusted her glasses. Her voice was quiet at first. "Caraway agrees to establish personal advisory contracts for Gregory Collins and Daniel Pierce following completion of the acquisition." She stopped. The room remained silent. Evelyn nodded toward the next paragraph. Susan continued. "Combined compensation not to exceed $29 million during the first 3 years." One director leaned forward. "That was never presented to us." Daniel found his voice. "It was still under negotiation." "It was signed," Evelyn said. He looked at the document. The signature at the bottom belonged to him. Gregory's name appeared beneath it. Daniel's mouth tightened. Gregory stepped away from the windows. "These are transition agreements. They are common in transactions of this size. Then why did you conceal them? I did not conceal anything. Evelyn removed another page. This one contained instructions to keep the agreements outside the standard board portal until after the merger vote. She slid it toward him. Gregory did not touch it. A director named Charles Whitman picked it up instead. His face changed as he read. This email came from your office. Gregory looked toward Daniel. Daniel looked at the table. Charles continued. It says disclosure before approval could create unnecessary resistance from directors concerned about appearances. A low murmur moved through the room. Evelyn let it grow, for years these men had controlled meetings by filling every silence before doubt could take shape. She did the opposite. She allowed the silence to become evidence. Outside the glass wall, more employees had gathered. Assistants, analysts, legal staff. Even Leonard, the maintenance contractor, stood at the far end of the hallway beside his cart. No one had invited them. No one ordered them away. They watched through the glass as the quiet woman they had ignored placed the bank's hidden truth across the table one page at a time. Evelyn reached for the conference phone. Margaret, are you still on the line? I am. Please confirm the authority transferred under the mission protection provision. Margaret Ellis answered with the controlled precision of someone who understood that every word might later be examined by attorneys. Under the provision, you currently hold full provisional executive authority, including the power to suspend transactions, preserve records, restrict access, appoint temporary officers, and remove executives where credible evidence suggests breach of fiduciary duty. Gregory gave a bitter laugh. So this is a takeover? Evelyn looked at him. No. A takeover is when someone arrives to seize what belongs to another person. She rested one hand on the original charter. I came back because you tried to sell what never belonged to you. Gregory's face reddened. Daniel pushed his chair back. You cannot dismiss us without an independent investigation. Harold Benson opened the restated charter. She can suspend you immediately. Daniel turned toward him. Careful, Harold. Harold met his eyes. The warning no longer had the effect it once did. I spent too many years being careful. The words carried farther than he intended. Outside the boardroom, Rachel heard them. So did the silent employees. Harold continued. The clause authorizes immediate removal when executive conduct threatens the bank's mission or assets. The investigation determines liability afterward. It does not prevent protective action now. Evelyn looked toward the security guards. Mr. Reed, please close the doors. Thomas Reed obeyed. The glass doors moved together with a soft click. For the first time that morning, the executives were the ones sealed inside, while everyone else watched. Evelyn turned to Susan. As chair of the audit committee, were you informed that Caraway intended to close 27 branches within the first 18 months? No. Were you shown the personal advisory contracts? No. Were you told that neighborhood properties had already been appraised for sale? Susan looked sharply toward Gregory. They did what? Evelyn removed a property schedule. Rows of addresses appeared beneath projected sale prices. Bronzeville, South Shore, Austin, Englewood, Little Village. Branches that had stood for decades were listed as liquidation opportunities. Susan's hand tightened around the page. My father opened his first business account at the Bronzeville branch. Daniel waved dismissively. This is exactly why sensitive financial decisions cannot be governed by emotion. Susan looked at him. My personal history is not the issue. She lifted the page. The issue is that you negotiated the sale of bank property before receiving board approval. Daniel's expression hardened. There were preliminary conversations. Then why are there signed appraisal authorizations? He had no answer. The room shifted again. Not dramatically. No shouting. No sudden accusations, but one by one, directors began moving their folders away from Gregory and Daniel, a few inches, a small physical distance. Yet everyone understood what it meant. Their loyalty was breaking. Evelyn opened another file. This email was sent 4 months ago. She read aloud. Once the merger is announced, community opposition will be loud but temporary. Avoid public hearings until physical consolidation has begun. She turned toward Gregory. You knew people would fight to save their branches. We knew change would be unpopular. You decided they did not deserve the chance to speak. The board cannot run a bank by listening to every complaint. Evelyn's voice remained level. You cannot run this bank by refusing to hear the people it was built to serve. Gregory leaned over the table. You have been absent for years. You walked away from all of this. The accusation struck harder than anything else he had said. For a moment, Evelyn saw Michael Harper's hospital room, the winter light falling across white sheets, his hand thin inside hers, his voice tired but certain. You gave this place everything. Let yourself live for a while. She had believed leaving daily operations was an act of trust. Gregory now held that trust against her like a confession. Pain moved across her face, only for a second. Then dignity returned. I stepped away from the office, she said. I did not surrender the promise. No one interrupted. Gregory slowly straightened. Evelyn continued. You were given stewardship, not ownership. You were given trust, not permission to erase the people who came before you. She looked toward the executives' portraits visible through the glass hallway. You removed Michael's name. She touched the charter. You removed mine. Then she looked toward the employees gathered outside. And once you learned how easy it was to erase founders, you began erasing customers, employees, and entire neighborhoods. The room went still. Daniel attempted one final defense. Caraway would have made Sterling stronger. Evelyn turned the presentation remote toward the screen. The map of Red Branch closures reappeared. Stronger for whom? Daniel said nothing. Margaret's voice came through the phone again. Ms. Brooks, outside counsel has reviewed the authenticated provision. They confirm the provisional transfer is effective. Gregory closed his eyes briefly. The last legal escape had vanished. Evelyn stood. Every director rose again. This time no one hesitated. Chairs moved back in a single uneven wave. Rachel watched from outside as the entire boardroom came to its feet. Not because Evelyn had announced her wealth, not because they feared her name, because the truth had stripped false authority from the men who had occupied the room. Evelyn looked around the table. Gregory Collins and Daniel Pierce are suspended, effective immediately. Gregory's head snapped toward her. You cannot. I just did. She turned to Thomas Reed. Please collect their building credentials and company devices. They may leave with personal property after legal staff has reviewed it. Daniel stood so quickly his chair rolled backward. This is humiliation. Evelyn looked at him with quiet sadness. No. Humiliation is being judged before anyone asks your name. Rachel lowered her eyes. Thomas Reed did the same. The words moved through the glass walls and into the hallway without needing to be louder. Evelyn continued. This is accountability. Gregory removed his identification badge. He placed it on the table with deliberate care. You think this bank will survive the panic you are creating? I think it will survive the truth. The stock will fall. Then we rebuild trust. Caraway will sue. Then we answer them. Employees will leave. Those who believe profit matters more than purpose may choose to. Gregory stared at her. For the first time, he had nothing left to threaten that she had not already considered. Thomas approached him. Sir? Gregory stepped away from the table. Daniel followed, his face pale and rigid. As they reached the glass doors, the employees in the hallway instinctively moved aside. No one jeered. No one celebrated. The silence was more powerful than either. Gregory saw the faces of people who had once lowered their voices when he had passed. Now they simply watched. At the door, he turned back. This institution will collapse under sentiment. Evelyn stood beside Michael's chair. Then it will be my responsibility to save it. The doors opened. Gregory and Daniel were escorted into the hallway. Only after they disappeared toward the elevators did Evelyn look at the remaining directors. Sit down. They obeyed. Rachel entered slowly. Harold remained standing. What happens now? He asked. Evelyn looked toward the branch closure map. The red circles still glowed like wounds across the city. Now we stop the sale. She changed the screen. A new document appeared. A preservation notice addressed to internal audit, cybersecurity, and federal banking regulators. Susan read the first line. Her eyes widened. You contacted investigators before you came here. Evelyn nodded. I came prepared to be wrong. She looked toward the empty seats where Gregory and Daniel had sat. I was hoping I would be. From somewhere several floors below, an elevator bell sounded, then another. Rachel's phone began vibrating with alerts. So did Harold's. Security radios crackled. Reception called to report that financial investigators had arrived in the lobby carrying federal credentials and document preservation orders. The directors looked toward Evelyn. She closed the founder's journal. This meeting is no longer about two executives. Her gaze moved across every face in the room. It is about finding out how much of this institution still deserves to be saved. Beyond the windows, thunder rolled over Chicago, and in the lobby below, the first investigators stepped through the revolving doors. They came without sirens, raised voices, or dramatic announcements. 4 men and 3 women in dark coats crossed the marble floor carrying document cases and sealed envelopes. Rain shone on their shoulders beneath the lobby lights. At the center of the group walked Special Examiner Laura Whitaker from the Federal Banking Commission, a calm woman in her late 40s whose gray eyes seemed to notice every camera, doorway, and hurried expression around her. The receptionist stood. Can I help you? Laura placed her credentials on the desk. We are here to serve a preservation order and begin an emergency compliance review of Sterling Civic Bank. The receptionist's practiced smile disappeared. Employees nearby stopped walking. The words traveled quickly through the lobby. Preservation order, emergency review, federal investigators. Within seconds, phones began vibrating across all 40 floors. In the executive boardroom, Rachel Torres watched new alerts appear on her tablet. Sterling stock halted pending material announcement. Unconfirmed reports of leadership removal. Caraway acquisition may be in jeopardy. She looked toward Evelyn Brooks. Evelyn read none of them. Instead, she stood beside the conference table studying the branch closure map while Harold Benson coordinated with external counsel. Susan Merritt spoke quietly to 2 audit committee members. The other directors sat in stunned silence, no longer discussing bonuses or quarterly returns. The doors opened. Laura Whitaker entered with 2 investigators and a court-appointed forensic accountant named Robert Gaines. Harold stepped forward. I'm Harold Benson, General Counsel. Laura shook his hand. Mr. Benson, we'll need immediate access to executive communications, transaction records, audit files, and all materials connected to the proposed Caraway sale. You'll have it. She looked toward Evelyn. And you are? Evelyn Brooks. Recognition came instantly. Laura's posture changed. Ms. Brooks, I requested your presence. Yes, ma'am. Laura glanced toward the empty chairs where Gregory Collins and Daniel Pierce had been sitting. Have the relevant executives been secured from accessing company systems? Rachel answered. Their credentials were deactivated 14 minutes ago. Company devices. Collected. Personal devices? Harold looked toward security. Legal preservation notices are being served now. Laura nodded. Good. We need the transaction frozen before any outside party attempts to move funds or delete records. Evelyn looked toward Rachel. Contact information security. Tell them no executive-level data leaves this building without written approval. Rachel moved quickly. As she stepped into the hallway, the scale of what had begun became visible. Employees clustered near office doors. Some whispered. Others stared at news updates. Several managers were already making private calls, their voices low and urgent. The same building that had seemed polished and invincible an hour earlier now felt like a ship that had struck something beneath the water. Rachel reached the Security Operations Center on the 32nd floor. Rows of monitors cast blue light across the dim room. Engineers worked quickly, locking accounts and copying servers. The director, Marcus Shaw, stood behind the main console with his sleeves rolled up. "We've got a problem," he said before Rachel finished speaking. "What kind?" "Someone triggered a remote deletion process from Daniel Pierce's credentials 7 minutes ago." Rachel's stomach tightened. "Can you stop it?" "We already isolated the account, but the command targeted community lending records, branch performance reports, and the acquisition due diligence archive." "Why those?" Marcus looked at her. "Because they show exactly who would be hurt by the sale." On one screen, red warning boxes flashed over file directories. Another displayed a progress bar frozen at 12%. "We stopped most of it," Marcus said. "But someone also accessed the customer migration files from an outside address." "Did they download anything?" "We don't know yet." Rachel thought of Daniel's face when Evelyn opened the envelope. He had known this was coming. "Preserve everything," she said. "Every login, every failed attempt, every device." Marcus nodded. "We're already mirroring the servers." Rachel returned to the boardroom with the news. Laura Whitaker did not react visibly. She simply turned to one of her investigators. "Add attempted destruction of records to the review." Harold closed his eyes. Susan stared at the empty seat beside Gregory's chair. "They were willing to damage the bank just to protect themselves," Evelyn answered quietly. "They stopped seeing the bank as something people depended on." The forensic review began before noon. Investigators spread across 3 conference rooms. Printers ran continuously. Sealed boxes filled the hallway. Every company phone belonging to senior leadership was cataloged and photographed. Employees from compliance, accounting, and information security were called in one by one. At first, most spoke carefully. They used cautious language. "I may have noticed. I cannot be certain. I assumed someone else had approved it." Then one employee changed everything. Her name was Denise Carter, a 43-year-old compliance analyst who had worked at Sterling for 11 years. She entered the interview room carrying a small notebook. Her hands trembled. "I reported the branch appraisals 6 months ago," she said. Laura looked up. "To whom?" "Daniel Pierce's office." "What response did you receive?" "I was told the properties were being reviewed for insurance purposes." "And you believed that?" "No." Denise opened the notebook. "I kept dates, meeting times, names." Harold leaned forward. "Why didn't you bring this to legal?" "I tried." She looked toward him. 3 times. The words struck him harder than an accusation. Denise continued. "Each request was redirected to executive review. Then my manager told me I was becoming difficult." Harold's face tightened. "I never saw your reports." "I know." She looked down. "They made sure you didn't." One testimony opened the door for another. A branch manager from South Shore revealed that executives had ordered him to reduce small business lending approvals so the location would appear less productive. A human resources director admitted complaints against Daniel had been quietly closed after employees were pressured to withdraw them. An internal auditor produced copies of expense transfers disguised as consulting fees. A regional vice president confessed that Gregory had instructed managers not to mention pending branch closures until after the merger announcement. Fear began turning into truth. Across the bank, employees who had remained silent for years started speaking. Some cried from relief. Some shook with anger. Others carried the exhausted expression of people who had waited too long to be believed. Evelyn listened to every report. She did not interrupt. She did not promise revenge. She asked only two questions. What happened? And who else was harmed? By mid-afternoon, the federal team uncovered the first direct transfer. A shell consulting company registered to one of Daniel Pierce's relatives had received 3 payments from a Caraway subsidiary. Total value, $2,400,000. Susan Merritt stared at the transaction record. This predates the board presentation. Robert Gaines nodded. By 8 months, Gregory and Daniel had not merely negotiated future compensation. They had already been paid. Laura Whitaker looked toward Evelyn. We have sufficient evidence to request an immediate freeze on related accounts and refer the matter for criminal investigation. The room went quiet. Evelyn's expression did not change. Do what the law requires. Outside, news trucks began lining the curb. Camera crews gathered beneath umbrellas across from Samuel Tower. Financial reporters spoke into microphones, while the bank's name glowed above them through the rain. The stock exchange suspended trading. Caraway issued a statement denying knowledge of improper payments. Within minutes, leaked documents contradicted it. The merger collapsed before the market closed. On the executive floor, several board members quietly submitted resignations. Others asked for private meetings with Evelyn. She refused to meet them alone. Whatever needs to be said can be said in front of counsel. The culture Gregory had built, private promises, closed doors, selective truth, was ending one conversation at a time. Near 5 o'clock, Evelyn stepped into the hallway for the first time since the investigation began. The rain had softened. Gray daylight pressed against the windows. Employees stood in small groups, watching her pass. No one ignored her now. Some nodded. A few whispered her name. Others looked ashamed. Evelyn noticed Leonard near the service elevator. His toolbox sat on the repaired cart. He lifted one hand. You came back, she smiled. I did. Took you long enough? A small laugh escaped her. Yes, it did. Leonard's expression grew serious. Michael would have been proud. The mention of his name opened a quiet ache inside her. I hope so. He would. Leonard rolled the cart toward the elevator, leaving Evelyn alone beside the windows. For one moment, the billionaire founder, the controlling owner, the woman whose return had shaken an entire institution, looked simply tired. Rachel saw her from the far end of the hall. She had spent the afternoon replaying every moment of the morning. The quick glance at Evelyn's coat, the assumption that she was lost, the invitation to sit and wait without first asking her name. Rachel had helped reveal the truth, but that did not erase what she had done before knowing it. She approached slowly. Ms. Brooks? Evelyn turned. Rachel's eyes were already wet. I need to tell you something. Evelyn waited. Behind them, investigators continued carrying boxes from the offices of Gregory Collins and Daniel Pierce. Employees watched from doorways. The silent system was finally being forced to see itself. Rachel took a breath, but her voice broke before the first sentence came. And Evelyn understood that the next truth uncovered inside Sterling Civic Bank would not be found in an email, a payment record, or a locked archive. It would come from a woman finally willing to admit what she had seen in herself. Rachel Torres stood a few feet away, struggling to steady her breathing. The executive hallway had grown quieter as evening approached. Most employees remained at their desks, though little work was being done. The muffled sound of printers and distant conversations drifted through the floor. Rainwater traced slow paths down the windows, and the city beyond them glowed beneath a sky turning from gray to blue-black. Evelyn waited. She did not rescue Rachel from the silence. Some truths needed room before they could be spoken. Rachel wiped beneath one eye with the side of her finger. "This morning," she began, "when you walked in, I looked at your coat, your shoes, that old portfolio." Her voice tightened. "I decided what kind of person you were before you said more than a few words." Evelyn listened without interruption. Rachel looked toward the row of leather chairs where Evelyn had been told to wait. "I thought you were looking for human resources, or facilities, maybe housekeeping." She swallowed. "I never asked your name." The words seemed to remain in the hallway after she spoke them. Employees nearby pretended not to listen, but Evelyn saw several faces turn slightly toward them. Rachel continued, "I've told myself all afternoon that I didn't mean to humiliate you, that I was following procedure, that the board was in a private session." She shook her head. "But none of that is the whole truth." Evelyn's expression remained gentle. "What is the whole truth?" Rachel looked directly at her. "I thought important people looked a certain way." The admission hurt more than any excuse would have. "I thought authority came with expensive clothes, assistants, and people rushing to open doors. When you came in alone, I decided you could wait." Her eyes filled again. "And now everyone knows who you are." "That is not why you are upset," Evelyn said. Rachel hesitated. "No. I'm upset because I realized I might have done the same thing even if you weren't Evelyn Brooks." The hallway became still. Rachel's voice lowered. "I keep thinking about the people who came before you. Delivery workers, job applicants, older customers who needed extra time. People who spoke softly or wore clothes that didn't match this place." She looked toward the lobby elevators. "How many of them did I make feel small?" Evelyn studied her for a moment. She saw no performance in Rachel's face, no attempt to protect her job. Only shame, and the fragile beginning of change. "You cannot repair every moment that has already passed," Evelyn said. Rachel nodded slowly. "I know. But you can decide what the next moment will look like." Rachel looked up. Evelyn glanced toward the chairs. "You were not wrong because you failed to recognize me." Rachel's face tightened. "Sure. You were wrong because you decided I was not worth recognizing." The sentence landed softly. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, tears had spilled down both cheeks. "I am sorry. I believe you." Rachel seemed surprised. "You do?" "Yes. Does that mean you forgive me?" Evelyn looked through the glass toward the city. "Forgiveness is not permission to forget." She turned back. "It is permission to become better." Rachel took a slow breath. "I want to." "Then begin tomorrow morning." "How?" "Ask the first person who enters that building for their name." Rachel nodded. "Then listen to the answer." "I will." Evelyn gave the smallest smile. "Good." The tension in Rachel's shoulders eased, though the shame did not disappear completely. It had changed shape, no longer something to hide from, something to learn from. A movement near the boardroom drew Evelyn's attention. Harold Benson stood alone beside the conference table, gathering legal folders into neat stacks. His tie hung loose, and the careful polish he carried each morning had given way to exhaustion. Evelyn looked toward Rachel. "Excuse me." She entered the boardroom. Harold glanced up. Most of the room had been cleared. The merger presentation was gone from the screen. Empty coffee cups and scattered pens remained as small evidence of a day that had begun in confidence and ended in collapse. Evelyn walked toward him. "You should go home." Harold gave a tired laugh. "I'm not sure I deserve to." "That is not what I said." He set down the folder in his hands. For several seconds, neither spoke. The chair Michael once used stood between them. Harold looked at it. "I recognized you the moment you sat outside. I know. I should have stood up." "Yes," His face twisted with regret. I told myself I needed to protect my position until I understood why you had come. Evelyn said nothing. Harold continued. Then I told myself I could do more good from inside the room than outside it. His voice grew quieter. Then Gregory started speaking, and I stayed silent anyway. Rain tapped against the windows behind them. Harold pressed both hands against the table. I sent you the information months ago. That took courage. It should have taken less time. Yes. He nodded, accepting the answer. Denise tried to reach legal 3 times. I never saw her reports, but I built the system that allowed them to disappear. Evelyn watched him carefully. This was not the Harold she had known when Sterling was young, but perhaps pieces of that man remained. Fear had bent him. It had not entirely broken him. Why did you send the documents? She asked. Harold looked toward the old charter. Because I found Michael's name in a merger memo. Evelyn's expression changed. What did it say? That public references to the founding mission should be minimized because they might strengthen community opposition. He swallowed. They reduced his life to a communications risk. A quiet grief entered his voice. I helped write the first lending agreement with him. I knew what this bank meant. And still I let Gregory turn it into something else. Evelyn walked closer. You cannot change the years when you remained silent. Harold nodded. But today you spoke. After you forced me to. No. Evelyn looked him directly in the eyes. I gave you a moment. You chose what to do with it. Harold looked down. I was afraid. Courage does not require the absence of fear. It requires deciding fear will not make the choice for you. The words settled over him. He picked up his identification badge from the table. I assume the new leadership will ask for my resignation? That has not been decided. He looked surprised. After everything? Evelyn turned toward the glass wall. Outside, Rachel was helping an investigator carry sealed document boxes toward the elevators. Sterling does not need perfect people. It needs honest ones. Harold followed her gaze, and people willing to repair what they helped damage. Evelyn looked back at him. Are you willing? Harold answered without hesitation. Yes. Then tomorrow you begin by finding every complaint your department failed to receive. You speak to every employee who was ignored, and you do not hide behind procedure. His eyes grew wet. I understand. Good. Evelyn picked up Michael's green journal from the table. Then go home. Harold gathered his coat. At the door, he stopped. Evelyn. She looked up. Thank you. For what? For not treating me as though the worst thing I did is the only thing I am capable of being. Evelyn's voice softened. Do not make me regret it. A faint smile appeared on his tired face. I won't. He left. Evelyn remained alone in the boardroom. The day had exposed bribery, deception, and years of institutional silence. Yet the moments that stayed with her were smaller. Rachel admitting she had judged a stranger. Harold admitting fear had become habit. Leonard saying Michael would have been proud. The bank would not be repaired by changing names on office doors alone. A new chief executive could remove corrupt people. Only honesty could remove the culture that had protected them. Evelyn carried the founder's journal into the hallway. Rachel was waiting near the elevators. Her face had been washed, though her eyes remained red. Ms. Brooks? Yes? The communications team says reporters are asking when you'll issue a statement. Not tonight. The employees are asking questions too. They deserve answers first. Rachel nodded. What would you like me to do? Evelyn looked down through the open atrium. Far below, the lobby glowed beneath warm yellow lights. Employees had gathered along the balconies of several floors. watching investigators move through the building. They looked frightened, confused, some ashamed, most uncertain about what would happen next. Evelyn had spent the day listening to the truth of what Sterling had become. Now the institution needed to hear the truth about itself. "Reserve the central atrium for tomorrow morning," she said. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. "For how many people?" "Everyone. All headquarters staff, all employees who can attend. And arrange a live broadcast for every branch." Rachel lifted her tablet. "What time?" 9 o'clock. "What should I tell them the meeting is about?" Evelyn looked toward the blank wall where the founders' photographs once hung. "Tell them we are going to discuss why this bank still deserves to exist." Rachel typed the words, and after that, Evelyn looked at the bronze key hanging once more from the old portfolio. The small object had opened a room. The truth inside that room had opened an institution. Now something else needed to open. The eyes of everyone who had learned to walk past suffering without seeing it. "After that," Evelyn said, "we begin again." Below them, the lobby lights brightened as night settled over Chicago. And across 40 floors of Sterling Civic Bank, 8,000 employees received the same message. Mandatory company address, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. For the first time in years, no one knew what leadership would say. But everyone knew they would be listening. By 8:30 the next morning, the central atrium of Sterling Civic Bank had begun to fill. The storm had passed during the night, leaving downtown Chicago washed clean beneath a pale autumn sky. Sunlight poured through the tower's glass walls and scattered across the marble floor in long bands of gold. Coffee machines hissed in nearby cafes. Elevator bells sounded almost without pause as employees arrived from every department and every floor. Accountants stood beside maintenance workers. Loan officers gathered near security guards. Senior managers who once entered through private corridors now waited shoulder to shoulder with receptionists, analysts, drivers, and branch employees brought in by early trains. Thousands more watched through live feeds from offices across Illinois and neighboring states. No music played. No promotional video filled the screens. The enormous display behind the temporary stage showed only the bank's original name in plain black lettering. Sterling Civic Bank beneath it appeared a second line. "Every person deserves to be seen." Rachel Torres stood near the production table checking the broadcast connection. She had arrived before sunrise. The first person through the revolving doors that morning had been a delivery driver carrying 2 heavy crates of bottled water. Rachel had walked directly toward him. "Good morning. My name is Rachel. What's yours?" The man had looked surprised. "Anthony?" "Thank you, Anthony. Let me help you find the service elevator." The moment lasted less than a minute. No one applauded. No camera recorded it. That was precisely why it mattered. Now Rachel watched employees gather beneath the warm atrium lights, wondering how many small changes like that would be required before the building truly became different. Near the front stood Leonard beside his maintenance cart. His gray uniform had been freshly pressed, and the old toolbox Evelyn had helped him lift rested securely on the lower shelf. Harold Benson stood several feet away, holding no folder, no legal pad, no shield of paper between himself and the people around him. Susan Merritt spoke quietly with branch managers from Bronzeville, South Shore, Austin, and Little Village. Many had traveled through the rain the night before after learning their locations were marked for closure. At exactly 9 o'clock, the murmuring faded. Evelyn Brooks stepped onto the stage. She wore the same simple black suit from the day before. No diamonds, no dramatic entrance. The worn leather portfolio rested on a small table beside the podium, the bronze key still attached to its handle. 8,000 employees rose. Those inside the atrium stood first. Then, on the screens, employees in branch offices began doing the same. In conference rooms, behind teller counters, inside lending centers, across entire cities, people came to their feet. Evelyn looked at them. The sight carried no triumph, only weight. A day earlier, some of these same people had walked past her without asking her name. Now they stood because the world had told them she was powerful. That difference was exactly what she had come to address. "Please sit," she said. Chairs shifted. The atrium settled. Evelyn placed both hands on the podium. "Yesterday morning, I entered this building for the first time in many years." Her voice moved easily through the open space. "I arrived alone. I wore an old coat. I carried a portfolio that has been with me longer than some of you have worked here." A few nervous smiles appeared. "No one recognized me." She paused. That was not the failure. Several employees looked toward Rachel. Rachel did not look away. The failure was that people decided I did not matter before they knew who I was. The words traveled through the atrium with quiet force. I was told to wait outside a boardroom where executives were preparing to sell this bank, close neighborhood branches, and collect millions of dollars for themselves. A murmur moved through the crowd. Evelyn continued. "For 6 minutes, I sat in that hallway. People passed. Some glanced at me. Most looked away. Not one asked my name. Silence settled again. 6 minutes is not a long time. But it was long enough to show me what this institution had become." On the screen behind her appeared an old photograph. Evelyn and Michael Harper stood outside their first storefront, both wearing rolled sleeves, both smiling beneath a crooked hand-painted sign. The audience leaned forward. This bank did not begin in a tower. It began in a rented office where the heat failed every winter and the windows shook whenever the train passed. A soft ripple of laughter moved through older employees. Michael Harper and I had very little money. What we had was a promise. The screen changed. The 5 founding principles appeared in Michael and Evelyn's handwriting. Every customer will be seen. Every applicant will be heard. No community will be abandoned solely because serving it is less profitable. Leadership will remain accountable to the people affected by its decisions. Dignity will never be treated as a luxury. These words were not written for decoration, Evelyn said. They were written because both of our families knew what it felt like to stand across a desk from someone who had already decided we were not worth helping. Her eyes moved across the crowd. Michael's father lost a business because a bank would not give him 30 extra days. My mother carried years of honest financial records into 6 institutions and was denied before anyone truly listened. We created Sterling because rejection had taught us what a bank should never become. Evelyn looked toward the blank white wall above the lobby. Over time, our history was removed. Our mission became a slogan. Service became a cost. Silence became a survival skill. Yesterday, we learned what that silence protected. Behind her appeared the list of branches that had been marked for closure. Employees from those locations sat very still. The merger with Caraway Financial Group is canceled. Applause began. Evelyn lifted one hand. It faded. The 27 branches scheduled for closure will remain open while we conduct a community review. Several branch managers covered their mouths. One man lowered his head as emotion overtook him. We will restore the small business lending program. We will reopen applications that were rejected under manipulated performance targets. We will establish independent review panels so no employee can bury a complaint simply because it is inconvenient to leadership. The screens displayed each reform as she spoke. A protected employee reporting system, public community impact hearings, transparent executive compensation, mandatory review of branch closures, equal service standards for every visitor, promotion criteria based on integrity, performance, and service rather than personal loyalty. The atrium remained silent, but it was no longer the silence of cowardice. It was attention. Evelyn looked toward Leonard. Yesterday, while executives discussed millions of dollars, an elderly contractor nearly fell in our hallway. Leonard's eyes widened. Many people saw him. Only a few moved. She looked toward the thousands gathered around him. A culture is not revealed by what it writes in annual reports. It is revealed by what people do when someone drops a toolbox. Leonard lowered his gaze, deeply moved. Evelyn continued. This institution will honor employees who protected customers, challenged improper orders, and served their communities when leadership failed them. Names appeared on the screen. Denise Carter, the compliance analyst who preserved records, Marcus Shaw and the security team who stopped the deletion process, branch managers who quietly maintained lending services despite pressure to reduce approvals, dozens of tellers, advisors, and loan officers who had helped vulnerable adults understand paperwork without charging extra fees or rushing them away. Applause rolled through the atrium. This time Evelyn allowed it. Denise stood in the crowd with tears on her face. Marcus Shaw bowed his head. Employees turned toward colleagues whose quiet acts had never before been recognized. When the applause softened, Evelyn looked toward Harold Benson. Some people spoke late. Harold's face tightened. But late courage is still courage if it is followed by honest work. He met her eyes. Others made mistakes and admitted them. Rachel stood perfectly still. A humane institution does not pretend people never fail. It asks what they do after they understand the harm. Evelyn stepped away from the podium. For a moment, she stood without notes, without a title displayed beneath her name, simply a woman speaking to people. The greatest danger to Sterling was not two corrupt executives. It was an entire culture learning not to see. Her voice softened. Some of you were afraid. Some were tired. Some believed silence would keep you safe. Some simply stopped noticing who paid the price. She allowed the truth to settle. I am not asking you to spend the rest of your careers feeling guilty. I am asking you to become responsible. Heads lifted across the atrium. When a customer is confused, help them. When a coworker is ignored, speak. When a visitor looks out of place, do not ask whether they are important enough to deserve respect. Ask their name. A warm stillness moved through the room. This bank cannot promise that every application will be approved. It cannot promise that every decision will make everyone happy, but it can promise that no human being will be treated as invisible. The applause began near the back. One person, then several. Within seconds, it rose through the atrium like thunder. Employees stood again. This time they were not standing because Evelyn owned the bank. They were standing because they recognized the truth in what she had said. Leonard clapped with both hands resting above his cart. Rachel cried openly. Harold stood with his shoulders straight for the first time in years. Evelyn waited until the applause slowly faded. There is one more decision. The room quieted immediately. Many assumed she would announce that she was returning as chief executive. Reporters watching from outside expected the same. The directors near the stage glanced at one another. Evelyn looked toward Michael Harper's photograph. I did not return to build another throne. She turned toward the crowd. The future of Sterling Civic Bank cannot depend on whether one powerful person happens to be watching. The employees listened carefully. Tomorrow morning, this institution will have new leadership. Harold looked toward her, uncertain. Rachel lowered her tablet. Evelyn rested one hand on the old leather portfolio. And the people I have chosen may surprise many of you. A murmur moved through the atrium. She did not reveal the names. Not yet. Instead, she closed Michael's green journal and lifted the bronze key from the table. The metal caught the sunlight pouring through the glass tower. This key once opened a forgotten room. She held it for everyone to see. What was inside reminded this bank of its past. Her fingers closed gently around it. What happens tomorrow will decide whether we deserve a future. The screens faded to black. The meeting ended, but no one moved immediately. Across the atrium, 8,000 employees remained standing beneath the warm yellow light. wondering whose names Evelyn Brooks would speak next, and whether the new Sterling Civic Bank would truly become the place she had just promised. Evelyn stepped away from the podium and looked out across the crowd. The applause had faded, but its warmth still seemed to hang in the air. Employees stood between marble columns and glass railings, some with tears on their faces, others with expressions of uncertainty. Reform sounded inspiring beneath bright lights. Living it would be harder. Evelyn understood that. She had built Sterling once from almost nothing. She knew that institutions were not changed by speeches. They were changed by thousands of small decisions made after the microphones were turned off. She lifted one hand. Before you return to work, there is one more thing you deserve to know. The atrium quieted again. Harold Benson stood near the front beside Susan Merritt. Rachel Torres remained at the production table, still holding her tablet against her chest. Evelyn looked toward Harold. "Mr. Benson, please come forward." A murmur passed through the crowd. Harold's face tightened with surprise. For a moment, he did not move. Then Leonard, standing several rows behind him, gave the slightest nod. Harold stepped onto the stage. He looked older than he had the morning before. The weight of the investigation, the public failure, and his own years of silence seemed visible in the lines around his eyes. Evelyn met him beside the podium. "For 25 years, Harold Benson has served this bank." Harold lowered his gaze. For too many of those years, he allowed fear to weaken his judgment. The words were honest. No one mistook them for praise. He remained silent when he should have spoken. Harold looked toward the employees gathered below. "I did," he said. His voice carried through the microphone. The crowd became completely still. Evelyn continued. "But when the final choice came, he told the truth, knowing it could end his career." She looked directly at him. "Sterling does not need a leader who pretends never to have failed. It needs one who understands the cost of failure and refuses to repeat it." Harold's eyes filled. Until the independent board completes a full search, Harold Benson will serve as interim chief executive officer. The reaction moved across the atrium in layers. Surprise first, then scattered applause, then stronger approval from employees who had watched Harold finally stand against Gregory and Daniel. Harold turned toward Evelyn. "I don't know if I deserve this." "That is not the question. What is? Whether you will earn it." He nodded. "I will." Evelyn faced the crowd again. Mr. Benson's first responsibility will be to reopen every complaint that disappeared under the previous leadership. He will meet with employees and community representatives before making any major policy decision. And he will report publicly on what this bank failed to do. Harold stepped toward the microphone. "I spent years believing that protecting the institution meant avoiding conflict." He looked around the atrium. "I was wrong. An institution is not protected when truth is buried. It is only made weaker." He paused. I cannot change what I failed to say before, but from this moment forward, no employee should ever wonder whether this office will hear them." The applause grew. It was not celebration, it was acceptance of a beginning. Evelyn waited until it quieted. Then she looked toward Rachel. "Ms. Torres." Rachel froze. Several employees turned toward her. "Please join us." Rachel walked slowly to the stage. Her shoes echoed across the marble, the same way they had when she hurried toward the boardroom the day before. Only now, no one saw an assistant carrying someone else's instructions. They saw a woman being asked to answer for what she had learned. Rachel stopped beside Evelyn. "You judged me before asking my name," Evelyn said. Rachel nodded. "Yes. You have admitted that publicly and privately." "Yes. And this morning, you greeted the first person who entered this building." Rachel glanced toward Anthony, the delivery driver, who stood near the back after being invited to stay for the address. A faint smile crossed his face. Evelyn continued. Real change is not proven by regret. It is proven by practice. She turned toward the employees. Rachel Torres will lead a new Office of Community Experience and Workplace Culture. Rachel's eyes widened. The crowd stirred. This office will review how customers, visitors, vendors, and employees are treated from the lobby to the executive floor. It will have authority to investigate service complaints, recommend training, and report directly to the independent board. Rachel looked at Evelyn. I made the mistake that revealed the problem. Yes. Evelyn's answer was gentle, but firm. That is why you understand how easily it happens. Rachel swallowed. What if I fail? You will. The bluntness surprised her. Evelyn continued. Everyone fails. The question is whether you hide it, excuse it, or learn fast enough to protect the next person. Rachel nodded through tears. Then I'll learn. Good. This time, when the applause began, Rachel did not lower her eyes. She faced it with humility. Harold stood on one side of Evelyn. Rachel stood on the other. They were not flawless people. That was precisely the point. Sterling's future would not be built on the illusion of perfect leadership. It would be built on accountability. In the weeks that followed, the building changed slowly, not through grand gestures alone, through habits. The receptionist desk began asking every visitor's name before asking whom they had come to see. Security guards received new training focused not only on access rules, but on dignity. Branch managers held evening meetings in community centers, union halls, church basements, and small restaurants beneath buzzing neon signs. Customers described years of feeling rushed, ignored, or judged. Sterling employees listened. Some answers were painful. Several managers were removed after investigations confirmed repeated discrimination and intimidation. Others were retrained and given the opportunity to change. The 27 branches remained open. At the Bronzeville location, the first reopened small business loan went to a 56-year-old woman expanding a neighborhood grocery store she had operated for 18 years. At South Shore, an elderly customer received help replacing stolen identification without being told to return another day. At Little Village, bilingual employees were added, so customers no longer needed to bring relatives to understand basic documents. None of these moments made national news. Evelyn considered them more important than the headlines. Gregory Collins and Daniel Pierce faced formal charges related to bribery, concealment, and attempted destruction of records. Their financial accounts tied to the Caraway deal were frozen, and several directors who knowingly supported the scheme were permanently barred from leadership roles at Sterling. Evelyn did not attend the hearings. She received updates from counsel and asked only whether customers and employees remained protected. When one reporter accused her of showing too much mercy toward those who had stayed silent, Evelyn answered calmly, "Justice removes people who abuse power. Revenge teaches everyone else to hide their mistakes. I want the truth visible." 1 month after the morning she was made to wait, Evelyn returned to the lobby. The rain had given way to the first clear cold of early winter. Outside, buses sighed at the curb. Office workers hurried past beneath a sky the color of pale steel. Warm yellow light spilled through Sterling's revolving doors onto the sidewalk. Inside, the white marble remained. The digital screens remained. But the empty wall was no longer empty. A large photograph now hung where Gregory's leadership display had once stood. It showed Evelyn Brooks and Michael Harper outside the original storefront. Michael's shirt was wrinkled. Evelyn's hair had come loose in the wind. Both were laughing. Beneath the picture were the words, "Founded by Evelyn Brooks and Michael Harper. Built to see the people others overlooked." Beside it stood a glass display case. Inside rested the dark green journal, a copy of the founding charter, and the small bronze key. A simple plaque explained that the key had opened the original founder's archive after years of neglect. It did not mention Evelyn's wealth. It did not describe the boardroom confrontation. It said only, "A locked door preserved the bank's memory. An open door must preserve its dignity." Evelyn stood before the display for a long time. Michael's photograph caught the afternoon light. For a moment, she could almost hear him laughing in the old storefront. People think banks are built with money. They're built with trust. Her eyes grew wet. She did not wipe them. A soft commotion near the revolving doors drew her attention. A delivery driver entered carrying 2 large packages stacked high enough to block part of his face. His coat was damp from the cold, and one boot left a small trail of melted slush across the polished floor. A senior executive in a tailored navy suit was crossing the lobby. A month earlier, the executive might have stepped aside and let someone else handle it. Instead, he walked directly toward the driver. "Good afternoon." The driver shifted the boxes. "Afternoon. My name is Thomas. What's yours?" "Calvin." "Welcome, Calvin. Those look heavy. Let me help." Before the driver could protest, Thomas lifted the top package. Together they carried the boxes toward the service elevator. No one applauded. No one took out a phone. The receptionist simply smiled and greeted the next visitor. Rachel stood behind the desk, speaking with an older woman who had arrived early for a meeting. Harold crossed the lobby without an entourage and stopped to ask Leonard how his knee was feeling. Small moments, ordinary moments, the kind on which a culture was truly built. Evelyn smiled. She buttoned her gray coat and walked toward the revolving doors. Rachel noticed her leaving. "Ms. Brooks?" Evelyn turned. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" Evelyn looked once more at Michael's photograph. "No." Rachel's expression fell slightly. "Not tomorrow." Evelyn smiled. "But I'll be watching." She stepped through the revolving doors and into the cold Chicago afternoon. The city moved around her. Buses groaned. A train rumbled above wet streets. Steam rose from a food cart on the corner, carrying the smell of coffee and roasted nuts into the wind. Behind her, Sterling Civic Bank glowed against the early evening sky. For years, the building had carried power without remembering purpose. Now its doors opened differently. Evelyn crossed the street and paused beneath the same awning where she had stood 1 month earlier. She looked back. Through the glass, the first person entering the lobby was greeted by name, then the second, then the third. The woman who had once been made to wait outside her own office no longer needed everyone to recognize her face. She had taught them something more important: to recognize the humanity in every face that came through the door. And as warm light spread across the sidewalk, Evelyn Brooks walked into the city knowing that her dignity had never depended on a boardroom standing up. But because she had stood calmly when no one else would, an entire institution had finally learned to rise. Maybe that's the image worth carrying with you. The bronze key resting inside the glass display, no longer opening a forgotten room, but reminding everyone who walked through those doors that respect should never be locked away. Long after the headlines faded, that quiet moment became the true legacy Evelyn Brooks left behind. This story reminds us that the cost of prejudice isn't measured only by the people we hurt. It is also measured by the opportunities, wisdom, and humanity we almost fail to recognize. The deepest regret often comes not from what we said, but from the moment we decided someone wasn't worth seeing. Today, try one simple thing. Before making an assumption about someone, ask their name and really listen to the answer. The next time you're tempted to overlook someone because of how they look or what they wear, remember how Evelyn Brooks changed an entire bank without ever raising her voice. If this story made you stop and think, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated? Or have you ever realized too late that you judged someone too quickly? Share your story in the comments below. And stay with us, because our next story begins with another ordinary moment that will quietly change everything.